Great, thank you so much for that introduction. I should say, actually, I'm put here as Reuters Breakingviews on my badge. My description is large Reuters Breakingviews. I did found Breakingviews, but I'm now editor at large, not hopefully that large, at Reuters. So as we were told, I think that this session is going to focus on the microeconomic side of our challenges here in Europe, competition and competitiveness. So we have a fantastic panel. I mean, we've had them introduced already. Cairns from Mastercard, Neelie Kroes, who was Vice President of the European Commission, who's now Special Envoy for Startup Delta, the Dutch government's special initiative for helping startups, and Vittorio Radice from Rinascente. I'm going to start with Neelie Kroes. Can you just tell us what do you think, as a priority, Europe needs to do on a micro level to improve its competitiveness?
I love your word priority. For just a personal remark, I do have 2 grandchildren, girls in San Francisco, 5 and 7 years old, and it's a far away, so to say, so we are Skyping. So every Sunday afternoon we are Skyping, and it's more fun for the grandma than for the grandchildren, but they're still behaving. And at a certain moment, one of them was asking, by the way, Nene, what is your age? And honestly, I said at that time, I'm 72. And she said, and you are still alive? So for me, I'm in a hurry, and we need to have priorities, no doubt about that. And I'm so grateful that Mario was my predecessor in the European Commission. So he did a great job in Brussels, and I had the honor to be his successor for competition policy. 11 years in Brussels is quite some time, so to say. Life is still going on, and I'm still fascinated by that new point, but I need to explain that we have a crown jewel. Europe is a crown jewel, and I'm still impressed by that initiative in the 50s by 6 men, no women at that time. They were at home, they were advising those men, thinking. But those 6 men were taking that initiative after World War II to start this initiative. And it's still, for me, the most courageable decision that human beings can take. For 500 million people, 500 million citizens in Europe, gathered in one family, 28 nationalities. It is incredible. We never ever have seen such an initiative. Having said that, a crown jewel needs care, and that is a bit at stake. So when the former people who were sitting here were talking about repair, I think it's not the way to repair. It is taking initiatives. It is doing your job. It's delivering. And I'm not blaming my commission, between quotes, but it is just making a list what has to be done, the list what has to be done. And the list is starting with politicians. And I'm one, not anymore, and I can assure you life without politics is also exciting. But having said that, politicians have to deliver. And it's not anymore just talking in Brussels and taking decisions at that time, and going back home and in your capital saying, my goodness, in Brussels they have, and so on and so forth. Having said that, and of course, I think that Juncker is quite capable to communicate to the outside world, and when he is saying, this is your last chance, I think, goodness, come on. It's not the last chance, but you have to deliver. And you have to deliver to talk about competitiveness. For the rest of the world is not waiting till we are in shape. And that is what is at stake. With the TTIP, if we are not doing our job, and we will certainly touch upon, then Putin and China are the ones who are the winners. That's not what we have in mind. And my biggest worry is the younger generation. When I'm looking at the figures of the youth unemployment all over the place and in certain member states, too high, far too high. If some member states do have an unofficial figure of 60 or more % unemployed youngsters, then you are talking about a lost generation. And we learned from our history that the lost generation is a risk for our democracy. And that is what is at stake. And what I'm optimistic about is the startups, for they are not waiting for decisions of politicians. They are taking their own initiative. But then we have to create a culture and a ecosystem, so to say, where they can do their job. And in Italy, in Greece, in Spain, wherever, in the Netherlands, in the Scandinavian countries, those startups are absolutely fascinating. They are taking decisions and they are taking the initiative. And that makes a lot of sense for our competitiveness, for they are not closed in borders. They are borderless thinkers. They are taking courage and they are taking initiatives where we can find our way on the global scene. And we are not talking about Europe anymore, ring-fenced or whatever. We are talking about a global scene, so now we have to do the job, and therefore it's so important that, but I'm certain that we will be back.
No, we'll come back to some of these. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Neelie. Thank you for this both optimistic but, you know, warning opening remarks and priority. I think the youth unemployment is clearly it's terrible in large parts of Europe. Even in those that are doing moderately well, like the UK, it's still a blight on our society. Can I bring in Vittorio? What would you like to say just to open up this discussion a little bit? What are your...
I have to say, I'm happy there is still some passion in politics, because I never heard a speech so powerful and well done. What can I say? I'm probably the person most close to normal citizen, to the last consumer, the one that we open the door in the morning and we hope they come in so they can pay our salaries. Incidentally, Bocconi University and Rinascente were founded by the same person, so we have a lot in common between us. What do I see? I see, I was struck this morning when I heard that Jacques Delors put 3 phases of the European community. First was the phase of the policymaker, then the phases of the enterprise and the institution, and finally the phase of the citizen. And I thought that, it would have been nice if it was citizen first, then the policymaker, and then the institution to support all this project, and not the opposite. After all, we elect people to represent us and not to represent institutions, so they shouldn't be in the middle. And then I was struck by the fact that the European Union and the policymakers do recognize that they are quite far away from the normal people, but they don't know how to get there. They don't know how to talk to them. And that, to me, is a real big problem. Because unless we realize the need of the normal people, the everyday people, and their ambition, and we help them fulfill those ambitions, then there is no competition. I heard about regulation, and therefore the difficulties on financing new enterprise. And I have to tell you, to my office, I have a lot of young people coming with ideas on setting up new companies. But again, how do you finance them? And do we need continuous policies to prevent this, to de-risk all this? After all, if there is no risk, there is no progress. And therefore, I'm asking myself, do we need finally to elect policy breakers instead of policy makers? When I saw the new development of the Bocconi building, which the site was bought in 2006, and you're opening next year, what kind of competition is that? So many universities around the world have built buildings in 2 years, open up, and invite a student. And I have the same problem. I bought a building in Rome to open a department store, in January 2006. I will open a year after you, in February 2017. 11 years to build and to open a store. And you ask me about competition? Sorry.
Well, Vittorio, there are clearly some policies there that need to be broken. But I think we need to be careful about, generally speaking, electing policy breakers. I mean, I think in Athens a month ago, they elected a policy breaker. And there are a lot of populists around Europe who would be fit into the policy breaker category, which I'm sure, be careful what you wish for. Anne, I mean, can I bring you in here?
Yes,
What would you like to say?
Well, you know, I run a business for Mastercard, everything outside North America, which covers almost 210 countries around the world. So I get to see a lot of pace of change in many different geographies. And by the way, like Neelie, my daughter's actually at Berkeley in San Fran. I don't Skype, it's WhatsApp, because the kids don't talk to you these days. You're lucky if you get a text. And it's not a text anymore, it's WhatsApp. But anyway, the thing is that what I see around the world is that other places are moving much more rapidly than Europe. Now, I'm not talking about Silicon Valley. We all know about the incredible amount of cheap capital into Silicon Valley. We know about the size of the American economy, and that's why, you've got to ask yourself, why don't we have Facebook invented here? Why don't we have Google? Why didn't Alibaba spring up in Europe? And I think it's partly the cost of capital and funding when these businesses are nascent, and it's also partly the size of the economic bloc. But if we could get Europe to behave like one economic bloc, maybe we could get there. But other things that I see, thinking about Vittorio's comment, is the rise of public-private partnerships around the world, which stimulate innovation. I'm going to use South Africa as an example here. South Africa wanted to change the amount of banked population and really get money into the hands of everybody receiving benefits in a safe way. What did they do? The government launched biometric technology, and we worked with them and rolled out a capability in 10 months, Vittorio, that reached 21 million people across South Africa to actually move electronic. Now that's pace of change, and that's the kind of pace of change we need to see in Europe, which is why we need the legislative change to get a digital environment together. And personally, I welcome the investment in things like transport systems. We've seen London rise on public transport to go contactless over the last 6 months. And we're now doing 1 million taps a day. And it's absolutely fantastic. We need that pace of change happening right across Europe. And that's really what the job of government working with private partnerships needs to achieve here.
I see. Very good. I saw, Neelie, you wanted to come in with a point here.
Yeah, I agree and I disagree with Anne. Just talking about the mentality of, average European citizens and politicians, by the way. And I don't buy that politicians are not able or are not acting with their citizens. Some are not, no doubt about that. They are so in heaven that, and so on. But what is at stake? Our mentality in Europe is risk avoiding, is not out of the box thinking, and I'm very black and white for there are so many. And that is why I'm so intrigued by those startups. They are not risk avoiding. They are transparent, and they are asking for opportunities. And that means that the politicians, that governments have to act in that. A couple of years ago, and that is when you are a little bit older, you can just look back and tell a story. So I was so fed up with a lot of stories that people were saying, oh, all the talent of Europe is leaving for the US and they are all going to Silicon Valley. And I said to my people, come on, we invite a couple of those founders and initiative takers of the successful companies. And sometimes they were sold, like Skype, like Spotify, like the Rovio, not sold, by the way, Rovio, and still in Finland. And I invited 9 of them. 8 accepted my invitation. And to be honest to you, it was quite tough for normally spoken, and Mario certainly agrees, when the commissioner is inviting people, they are pleased to come in, and well, the Dutch commissioner always is offering nice Dutch coffee, so that's okay. But those people were not in a good mood, and they were 8 of the 9 came over. And my people were just sitting there, didn't prepare it well, and so I thought, goodness gracious. So they started with the question, why are you inviting us and taking our time? And I said, because I'm fed up with the line that everybody is leaving for the States. And you are my example in which it's not done like that. And I asked them, make a list of 10 issues that we have to change in Europe, all over Europe, so not only one country, but all over. And they wrote the manifesto. At the end of that session, they promised that they should write that manifesto. 6 weeks later, delivery, never happening when you're asking your official people, but okay, so that was quite nice. And it was making sense. I went to Herman Van Rompuy, at that time the president of the council, and I said, are you willing to get that manifesto? And he said, with pleasure. And I found out, and that was just, that out of the 8, half of them had a US passport. They were coming the other way around. They were intrigued by Europe, for the culture, for the opportunities, and so on, but still with the list to do. And that is what is at stake. And that is what Juncker has to do. And, well, sorry to take so much time. Then I'm a bit unhappy, to put it in a very diplomatic way, that, for example, roaming now is just delayed. Getting rid of roaming, that is the most ridiculous measure for roaming, is connected with borders in the US, or in Europe. And the borders are not anymore there. It's a single market. But
the roaming is finished from the end of the year, isn't it?
No.
What's happened?
I propose that it's delayed 2018. So it's still news for your message to the outside world. So, and I can explain why and so on. But talking about citizens and communicating, if first the citizen is promised, we get rid of roaming, and then now there is a new message. You can't.
That's terrible. I must say, I didn't know that. But maybe we can just then focus. I mean, clearly there clearly are some people who are prepared to take risks. I mean, actually, just this morning, before I came here, I had 2 young entrepreneurs who came to see me. I've invested in their startup. They're going to the next stage. There clearly is some, but we need to focus in on, though, what are the barriers that could be lifted. Do you want to talk about? I mean, we've got 2 people who are at least 2 people who are experts on the digital side of things. Perhaps you'd like to give, and Juncker has actually made this finally. I mean, it has been there for some time, but it is now on his list of priorities, is the digital single market. What do you want to see in terms of government action to remove barriers so that these things can happen?
Yeah, I mean, basically, what we have across Europe, we still have a patchwork quilt of things working in a different legislative environment in different countries under different rules, and it's even still difficult to move money across borders, even though we've had, SEPA since 1999, quite frankly. And I think that that sort of protectionism and the idea of supporting, say, local systems and local networks and so on in a world that's completely interconnected, where the consumer wants to go and buy things from everywhere in the world, is the thing that's really hampering growth here, and that's what we've got to stop. And at the same time, we're not giving our SMEs, to just chime in with the previous panel, we're not giving them enough tools to be able to export abroad. We're certainly looking at this, allowing them to come up onto the web and be able to sell their services around the world in a very easy manner. That's just not happening in a way that it should yet. So here's a couple of examples, both from a consumer and an SME point of view, where we need to improve.
Vittorio, do you have views on this digital agenda?
I think you mentioned speed and fast approach to market. I mean, again, I don't want to go back to regulation, but with all the laws that we have, preventing speed. So we are always late on getting to where we need to be. And we are building privacy laws that are the opposite of what the consumer is about. I mean, your kids have put their credit cards on every single site. They're sharing their information everywhere. And we are building laws to prevent that. And I have so many laws that don't allow me to talk directly to the final consumer to stimulate the competition, the growth that we talk about. So I think very much we are speaking two different languages. Really, the terminology that we use are very different. We're not on the same wavelength.
Apart from your concern, which I share about the roaming thing being delayed, what do you think that Juncker is focusing on the right things with this digital agenda?
Absolutely. No misunderstanding. I admire Juncker that he is pushing and so on, but there was already a couple of issues at the table and they are waiting. So that is my point. It's not only talking about roaming, not unimportant, for it's, by the way, one of the few examples where you can prove to the citizens that it makes sense to have Europe. But having said that, it is about bankruptcy for a startup when you can't take your opportunities when you have a bankruptcy in the short period, but that you have to wait. For example, in the Netherlands, you are not allowed to be active 1.5 years from your bankruptcy. Yeah, come on. And I'm always saying failure is a need, what you were saying, is a need to get much further than what you are doing when you are risk avoiding. I learned far more from my failures, and I can assure you my list of failures is much longer than my list of successes. But so there are a couple. It's also a mindset. It is talking about daring to just step in. By the way, your regulation, and I of course recognize it, but in a democracy, when you have regulation, and please not too much, no doubt about that we are on the same page, but if you need regulation, then it takes time in a democracy. It takes time at the European level, it's the national level, and with all the procedures and so on. My biggest point is not so much that Juncker is not active or whatever, but it is that the capitals are blocking at a certain moment what could be a better European approach for certain issues.
Would you like to pinpoint any capital that is blocking a particular initiative that you would like to see?
Oh,
name some names.
Paris, by the way, and I dare to look at Mario, but he also had experience, but I don't want to involve him in this discussion. Paris, by the way, is not really of help, is only making lines. We should have a European Google. Well, there was no blockage to have a European Google, but the decisions were not taken. So I can't blame someone who is taking initiative. And of course, when it's there, then you have to make a proper circumstance where they can function. But don't blame another one when there is a success, and then finding out that you are the sad one, so to say. But transparency, and by the way, giving initiative, but taking your courage and taking your responsibility in the capitals is a must.
Yes.
What I would like to also say is I think that governments can play a role in actually promoting things. So, for example, the Korean government decided that it wanted to reduce cash in the economy. The cost of cash is somewhere between 0.5% and 1.5% of GDP. So let's just say it's 1% across Europe. What's Europe, 14 trillion or something like that GDP? So we're talking about 140 billion. It's a lot of money. It's a fantastic amount of money to go after. So what can governments do to actually reduce cash in their economy? Well, they can incent SMEs to go electronic by reducing value-added tax. That's what the Koreans did. That's something that we've actually talked to the Italian government about doing, but so far we haven't made any huge progress on that. You can actually, as I say...
So what did you want the Italian government to do?
Well, if someone starts receiving electronic payments instead of being paid by cash, give a VAT break.
A full VAT break,
well,
or just
no,
a little bit of a discount?
Just a percentage, 2%, something like that.
Right.
That has worked very effectively in Latin America, in Asia, and it stimulates the economy, and it stimulates change, and it reduces cash, which is very expensive. And then the other thing is infrastructure. Change the infrastructure costs, actually go electronic. In Europe, the transport systems today are costing something like 170 billion is spent on transport. Something like 14 cents in the euro is spent actually dealing with cash in the transport systems because it's 50% cash. If you went electronic, the costs could drop to something like less than 1/10 of that. Yeah. So this really dovetails with the agenda. But you have to have governments and private partnerships making the decisions to do that. There's lots of things that practically can affect what's happening today.
Okay. I want to just if I could, I want just to look a bit at the rest of the sort of the European program, as it were. We've talked about the digital agenda. If I just want to gather some views about whether the European Union's program, the Commission's priorities, which are not only the digital single market, more on the single market and services, the energy union, capital markets union, there was some discussion about that earlier today. TTIP, we might talk a little bit about TTIP later. The investment program, the Juncker's big investment program, or so-called big. I mean, some people don't think there's actually any money in there at all. And the assault on red tape, which the first Vice President Timmermans has been given, your countryman, has been given the charge of trying to simplify unnecessary regulations. So, this is a broad question, but I mean, you can get into the details if you wish, but is this, I take Neelie's point that the governments have got to be on side. I mean, frankly, also the European Parliament has got to be on side if we're going to get any deregulation. I mean, often the European Parliament actually stands in the way of that. But broadly speaking, is that the right sort of list? And is that do we actually have the right agenda? Is it just a question of now pushing it through, or actually have we got the wrong agenda? Who would like? Neelie.
Sorry, you should jump in. It is my love baby, so to say. When we are talking about Europe and all those aspects that you are touching upon, and too, it's all connected when you are talking about health or education or culture or energy or climate, name it, you need a proper infrastructure. It is the new way, it's all digitized. It's not anymore only for the whiz kids and the nerds and so on. It is for normal citizens. When you are getting older, still your independency and your dignity, when it's used by governments, by the way, and by health institutions, to use that opportunity. And sometimes you are taking it for granted. Only the fact, and that is talking about internet, social media, and we all have it, and everybody has it. When you are thinking every second, so it is 8 million SMS are sent. 8 million every second. 25 mobile phones are sold. It is all in 1 second. And I can go on and on. It is absolutely fascinating. So it means that if we are not investing in that infrastructure, for people are not buying their iPad or their iPhone or whatever for just showing it, they are buying it for using it. Yeah. And if the infrastructure is not there, and that is my biggest frustration. So talking about the fund of Juncker, great. Talking about cooperation with the European Investment Bank and just getting far more out of his 350 billion euros, it's great. But if governments are not taking that decision, you can forget it. And then you have your iPhone or you have your whatever, but it's not functioning, or you have to wait till you, and so on and so forth. So really issues, and then on a European level, have to be taken into account. And then again, talking about Korea, but also talking about Taiwan, talking about, they are really investing. And now we have to leapfrog jumping to the future. We were taking the lead in the 90s, talking about, for example, standards, and therefore TTIP is so extremely important that we take the lead together with the US, but that we take the lead in standardization. And when we are talking about 5G, for example, and that is around the corner, and we have excellent research and innovation people active in this field in Europe, so just give them money to come to that final result that we can be the leader worldwide.
Vittorio, do you want to come? Do you want to come in here on this broader picture?
I believe strongly that the initiatives are the correct one. There's no doubt. I have no doubt on that. I'm just scared that we are the old world, and unless we become pragmatic and say, let's do it seriously, and not talk about only, and do the initiatives as a priority, as you said, with speed, then all the words that we say are just going to go lost. And because we are the old world, we have progressed so much. Now the progress is making the next progress in danger. We have too many laws. We have too many rules. Too much regulation. The other countries are progressing faster because they can do it. We have the ideas. Not that we don't have ideas. We have the will. We have the capital to do it. But if it takes 11 years to open a store, you can see that.
Yes.
I think this is absolutely right. And I think the thing about standards, well, certainly in my business, there's one global standard around the world that everyone's adopted, EMV. And recently we realized that the digital and the physical worlds are going to converge. They're converging fast. I mean, I'm never going to stop going into Vittorio stores to buy shoes. You know, I might buy some on the internet, but I'm going to enjoy shopping at the same time. It's going to be one seamless experience. And to achieve that all over the world, we need these global standards. We need to adopt them quickly. And we've got to stop countries trying to do their own thing. And that is still continuing in Europe today. And by the way, on the trade agreement, one of the things that I think really has to be addressed is the TITA, is the protection of investors. You know, that clause that actually protects investors as they invest in countries from government moves in those countries. Yeah. That's currently under dispute, I understand. That's got to go. That's got to be in there, which is a normal thing in an American trade agreement. But and there's things to sort out on both sides, but it's going very, very slowly.
I'll give you an example that came to mind. Thanks to Mario, finally, we are able to open our stores on Sunday. We sell product that nobody needs. That's just a pleasure to buy. And you can have time to have pleasure is Saturday or Sunday. Now, we just opened the stores on Sunday in the last 3 years. Before, we were closed on Sunday. While internet was open on Sunday. So how can I be competitive with internet company Amazon if I'm closed on Sunday? So either you closed internet, nobody does any business on Sunday, or allow me to open. Or you have to allow me to open on Sunday as well. So thank you very much. And guess what? Sunday has become the most important day So to be in touch with consumer and to really do what they elected you
Sunday
for.
is your most important day.
Sunday is the most important day.
Because people like me are shopping on Sunday.
But you didn't start upon your lunch break. For in Italy, a lunch break is half a day, so to say.
Sure. Because the food is good.
Okay. Well, you know, I think I want to pick up on Vittorio's point there because, you know, the big online retailer ASOS, I was talking to the head of marketing there a couple of weeks ago, and she said to me, not only are they open 24/7, but people that are ordering now on a Sunday night actually get their clothes delivered to them Monday morning. And that is the pace of change now. And of course, then send them back Monday night if they're, you know, not the right clothes for them. But the point is, that is what the consumer's expecting. That's what the kids want. They want to be coming, you know, in from their parties and ordering their clothes online. So that's what's happening.
Yes. Okay, I think this is fantastic. We could go on for a very long time, but I'm going to try and bring in a few questions from the floor. Yes, this man in the center, please say who you are and give us your question. Or on your left, you'll find there's a mic.
I'm Giacomo Passoni, living in Dublin and working for PayPal. My question is, how will be impacted the e-payments sector, let's say, due to the regulation of the multilateral interchange fee?
God, that's quite a...
What's the impact of the new interchange fee?
That's a question
Yes.
for you, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is what about the interchange fee
Right,
of between...
this is the move to go 2030 on the interchange, and basically...
The interchange fee is what? Is the
It's
commercial
basically
relationship between a retailer and a credit card?
is the financial relationship between the retailer and the bank. And basically what that change has done is it will shift about 6 billion from the banking sector into the retail sector. In terms of what it means for you and me on the street, probably not a lot, in the sense that that money doesn't shift into the consumer's hands. It could have some impact in terms of smaller retailers accepting electronic payments, which would be a good thing. It could have a negative impact in the sense that where we've seen this kind of regulation happening before, the banks have gone and started to charge fees to the consumer because they're lending money, they're covering the fraud on the card, they're issuing the card, they're paying all of the costs, and they've found it uneconomic when the regulators have done price fixing like this. Personally, I'm very anti-price fixing. I like to see real market forces happening to cause change, and we've seen secular shift from electronic to, from cash to electronic in Europe without that kind of regulation.
Are you nodding because you agree with Anne? Do you think that this is regulatory price fixing, or is it a regulatory intervention because basically there was a sort of cartel in operation to start off with? The latter. I don't know the detail, but we're clearly not going to get a final legal opinion here. But
by the way, the conclusion of Anne is sadly correct, that the bank and the retailer, and that the retailer is not giving it to the consumer. Yeah. But there you could push a bit, and then competition is at stake. For if one is acting, then there is a follow-up.
But you could argue if paying by credit card is not so expensive for the retailer, you could offer a discount and encourage consumer to use card as opposed to cash.
Yeah. It's just it hasn't happened.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? So
we
need to come back in to a future Bocconi to find the full. Someone back there, yes? Yes, please say who you are.
Hi, yes, I'm still Michele Troiani, still working at the London Stock Exchange, graduated in 2001 at Clefin. So my question is actually following this point that you just mentioned, Vittorio. It struck me, let's start with an anecdote. It strikes me every time I go to the Italian highway that I get to the toll and there's a long queue for people paying in cash. And I can bet on the fact that all of them have got not even a credit card, but at least just a bancomat. And on the other side, there's no queue. So, this is important also to tackle the kind of a black activity or just, the black money. Why, no one ever proposed to, for example, charge something to the one that just myself, withdrawing money at the ATM, or why the highway doesn't charge an extra 50 cents for paying in cash, or going back to the point from Anne, is not only having a VAT discount for the corporates, because they obviously need it, but also, as of now, the corporates, the company, the shops, the barber would pay Mastercard or anyone for having the machine. What drives that system is the customers, the consumer. Shall not the consumer have a discount or be overcharged when paying in cash? It's just an idea.
I think
or withdrawing
I think
by
there's a
the
good
ATM.
example of that, which is kind of indirect, but when you actually use your credit or debit card on London Underground, you end up paying the lowest fare because the computer systems, the ticket systems can calculate and track how much you've spent, and they discount as you're spending. If you just buy those tickets with cash, and coins, you don't get that benefit. So that's actually one example of, and perhaps the consumers don't realize, but it actually works that way. But I absolutely agree with you. People should be incented not to use cash. It's expensive, it's dirty, it's hard to reconcile, creates a black economy.
Black economy is, in certain parts of the world, really key. I mean, everywhere a bit, but let's have some more questions. Yeah.
Hi, good morning. Julie Bellani, British Telecom. I'm here in London. And thank you, first of all, for the lively debate and the colorful passion that we had from the panel. My question is to Anne. If you had a one wish for the new election, that something's going to change here in the UK, what would that be?
Well, my one wish would be that actually governments all focus on the war against cash, and start creating, take down barriers.
I think we've heard this about 4 times.
I know, but actually that is my one wish.
It's a consistent view. But what about you, Neelie? What do you want to have a view about our election? I mean, obviously one of the things that's going to come up, I mean, I think you're discussing it this afternoon, but we might have a little prefigure on this, is if the Conservative government, or if Cameron is back in Downing Street, he is going to have a referendum on whether Britain should stay in the EU or not. Do you have a wish about that?
For me, there is no need to have a referendum, for you should be silly if you would leave the EU. And we can just show and explain it, what's in for every UK citizen, no doubt about that. It is absolutely stupid to leave that. And there is another reason for me, but that's a bit dangerous in this Bocconi theme. I think that the EU needs the northern part of Europe to be a member, because sometimes the way of acting from politicians, the northern part and the southern part, is not completely different. So from a northern part, I think, as an economist by training, you are really needed, the Scandinavian and the other northern part, to keep everybody on board.
I see. So you think that the northerners are more virtuous than the southerners? Well, that is a dangerous thing. We have someone here.
My name is Veronica and I work at Johnson & Johnson. Let's imagine tomorrow we go all digital. And of course you need to start cutting maybe some jobs that are not non-digital jobs. I would like to know what's your opinion about the way you would like, or how would you requalify those people that, for example, have been working in non-digital jobs for 20 years?
Good question. Do you have a view, Vittorio?
In our business, even today, the business is changing. It's not standing still. So if I look back at what stores were 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and what they look now, first of all, we sell different things. We sell in a different way. We mix it with the, you don't buy, I don't know, shirts anymore. You buy either Armani or Gucci or Prada. So you're much more attached to a brand. So if that's the progression, and let's go digital, let's assume it, then we will have to, I don't know, start selling espresso, which you cannot buy online. As simple as that. So we will progress our offer, we'll progress our people, we'll progress the environment that we are creating in order for the people to be happy and to still be a meeting place the years to come. So I fully sponsor the digital agenda. When you try to acquire a product or a service, I still think that people need to meet like today. And if we become a meeting place, I'll be happy to.
But what about you, Neelie? I mean, what do we do about the older generation who perhaps, the grannies who perhaps not so adept with WhatsApp and Skype as you are? What do we do with the?
Thank you.
How do we retrain them, or what do we do to avoid them being left behind?
Number one, there is no job that's not connected with digital, whatever. It is in the health sector, education sector, name it. Every job, every activity is connected with digital, for it is the way we talk, we speak, we write, and so on. Having said that, for me, my biggest drive was and is, by the way, that we are not splitting our society. In former days, we were talking about the haves and the have-nots, and then it was about money. Now, I think we have to fight for not a split of the digital people and the not ones. And for me, there is one hero, and it is quite fascinating. In our research and innovation program and in our budget, there was a program, and there is a program to build robots and so on. And not only robots for the car industry or whatever, but also for health and the care industry. And that project, there was an involvement of an Italian lady. She's living in Rome. She is 94 years old. She was involved in that project. And she was taken as a tryout to have that robot in her team. And she explained to me at a certain moment, I visited her, absolutely fascinating, and she explained, I couldn't be living on my own if I didn't have this robot. And I'm sharp to the researchers, for sometimes they are making mistakes and it could be better and so on. So she was of extreme importance. And I asked her, how did you manage, number one, to be 94 years old, and how was your life? And she told me a story, and for the females that is quite fascinating. She said, I married when I was 17, and my husband then was not allowing me to go to school or to travel abroad. And I thought, goodness gracious, happy marriage. And she explained, and when I was 73, he passed away. And she said, that was my day. And I'm just quoting. But the story starts. For she said, I thought, no, I can go to school. She went to school, she went to university. I'm not certain if it was Bocconi, but she went to university. And she became a writer. She was writing poems and so on. And she is saying, I am, thanks to the digitization, able to just follow that path. And I'm able to just push the younger generation. And therefore, I don't believe in accepting the have-not. And by the way, Estonia, for example, is a country that has been proving after the Wende in the former century that they just completely turned around and went for the digitization of their country, for the elderly, for the youngsters, and don't accept an argument of people that you can't learn that anymore if you are 73 or 70, whatever. You can. It is absolutely fascinating what is possible.
The lady in Rome, I heard, found a boyfriend online.
So did my mom. She's 85.
Oh, here we
Anyway, what I want to say about this question was I grew up in the Northeast in the 70s, and of course they closed the mines in the 80s. Yep. And 80% of the town I grew up in was unemployed. So I've seen this labour shift before. Now in the Northeast, when I go home to see my relatives, there's big service industries there. You had British Telecom, you had Tesco, you had Virgin come in. You've got all sorts of, it's a thriving business community. It didn't happen overnight, but change happened quite quickly. I'm going to say in less than a generation. People changed, were retrained, and also people became mobile and moved to new places for work and so on. And that's the nature of the world. You've got to get up and go to where the jobs are. I've certainly moved around the world from the UK to the US, back to Holland, back to the UK, and I think that's the nature of life. You have to focus on that.
But I think this point about continuing education is critical, actually. I mean, 18 months ago, I went back to university part-time to do a research degree in philosophy. And it's not Bocconi, but it's Birkbeck, it's part of London, but it does focus on people who are already in careers. And my cohort of research students are from the age of 23 to 75. So I actually bang in the middle. We'll take Davide. We'll take a question from Davide and start. Okay, we'll take two together. We'll take you, and then yes, please. Stand up, and then we'll take Davide, and I think that might be maybe all we can do, but let's see.
Okay, my name is Bowen. I graduated from Bocconi a few years ago from the public management. I think I'm one of the two only Asian people here today, and I feel quite honored. And thanks, Bocconi, giving me this opportunity to be here and to be part of the family. Previously I was working for United Nations, but because I would like to have some competition and I would like to open the door for my customer, and then I decided to jump back to the private sector. So this is my situation right now. I'm working for a private company. The reason why I raised my hand because I feel the entire conversation is very interesting, and I really would like to give some my side of reflection. The topic is called Europe with global competition, and I believe I'm not originally from Europe, but I'm from the competition country, from China. So yeah, and First of all, I wanted to introduce internet virus video recently online, very popular, to Mr. Vittorio. It's about how Chinese people finish a building within 15 days, and that has 30 floors. So then maybe after watch this, you would like to open a department store in China immediately. I don't know, it's just, just my quick reflection. It just reminded me that video a lot. And secondly, I mean, as the very few Chinese students from Bocconi, I feel the time when I came here, I do experience a lot of difficulties. I mean, I'm not saying the school gave me very strong support, but the pressure from the bureaucracy system, the visa, and even after graduation, wanted to be an entrepreneur, but everybody facing the visa and all the taxes, everything. So I mean, for the Europe, I think, as you mentioned, it's in the old century, but from the competitor countries, we are living fast, and we have the resource, we have the capital, we have the passion, the people want to change the world. So in my point here, I just want to say, sometimes we always say, make your enemy become two friends. And also, my point about the competition is about the integration. how do you integrate the people from east to west, and then we can do the business together and boom the business together. It's just my point of view, and no any question for now. Everything is wonderful. I love Europe and I love Bocconi. Thanks.
Fantastic, very good. I think we haven't run out of time. Well, I think it's always healthy to end a Q&A without a question, but a statement.
I think actually having a diverse workforce is very, very important for global success. Certainly my head of strategy is Chinese, and we have an incredible amount of diversity across the business, both from a gender and from, people from different countries. I think this is very important to have people thinking differently, to understand how the world works, and to connect up properly. So it's great to see you here.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Neelie. And thank you, Vittorio. We've run out of time, I'm afraid. Okay, go for it. Make it very quick.
Yeah. So your fortnight for the permit and the 11 years. Democracy is just asking for time, but I don't accept 11 years. No. But it is unthinkable in a democracy that you can do it in the way it's done in the People's Republic, for example. Second way, one, and that is my other, sorry. Talking about the elderly, we should also talk about very, very young people. And we need to just introduce in the curriculum coding for the 4, 5, 6 years old. And it's done in this country. And I'm highly pleased with that. For you have to learn coding to get your line up.
I have to.
Okay.